recognized for their incredible talents in the game and who's paved the way for you guys in general. You know what I'm saying? And this gentleman, just to have him in the building is a privilege. To speak to him, to meet with him is just a privilege, and to have him here is an incredible opportunity for everybody. So do me a favor, clap your hands one time for the legendary Scott Storch, yo! Yeah, man. So we repping 8 and 9. Make sure you guys hashtag at 8 and 9 so you can follow these guys as well. They always open their door to us, so it's an incredible opportunity. So this is the Behind the Rhymes interview with Scott Storch. Scott, in case these guys have been under a rock for the last 15 or 20 years, how did you get started in the music industry? How did you get started in your production game?
You know what? I was a member of the Roots. I started in 1993 with them, a founding member of the Roots, and you know, just marching on in Philly and playing live on the streets, borrowing power from stores on South Street. And we got a record deal in '93.
Okay. What were some of the first pieces of equipment you bought as a producer?
MPC 60.
Okay. Banged out. Were you a big sampler when you first started?
No, not so much. I was always, that's the nature of what I do, is like all live stuff.
Okay. And working with the Roots, what type of creative chemistry did you guys have when you were putting records together, when you were actually in the studio?
You know what? Everybody knew their part. Like, you know, for me, it was always like the chords and the tone setter. I was on the bass, Questlove on the drums, you know, Black Thought and Malik B on the vocals.
And as far as what you've learned with working with them, how do you take some of that experience and take it with you when you're producing now?
Well, you know what? Playing in a band is definitely something that gives you some depth to your production and understanding the way live bands work and stuff. And then just being around Questlove and like watching them play the drums. So when I'm doing some stuff that has like that boom bap, like live sound versus like the drum program stuff, it's like you get that you know, it's subconscious. You realize it's like it's in there somewhere. It just comes out.
Just comes out, right?
Yeah.
So when you first coming up, who were some of the people that maybe you know, were inspired by or really looked up to in terms of production in general?
You know, when I first started making music, I was heavily into like the native tongue sound with rap, like the Jungle Brothers, De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest. And it was, for me, early on in my, you know, my writing and production, you know, career, like, I saw that as a good avenue for me because there was a lot of Fender Rhodes and piano stuff in there, versus sample.
So creative approach-wise, like when you actually go in the studio, you're ready to make records, maybe nobody's around, or you're not with an artist specifically, what are some of the things that, you know, get you in the vibe, or what are some of the things you do first when you start to make a record?
I love listening to like old music. I like listening to stuff that like has nothing to do with what I'm doing, and just letting all that stuff seep in.
Okay. Any techniques you use when you look for new samples, or when you're getting creative?
You know what? Sometimes it's just about finding the right tempo and the right groove, and just, you know, not overdoing something, overthinking it. Like if you gotta like add a million things to make something sound hot, it's not right. Like the kick, the snare, and the center, the nucleus of it, like the main chord thing, that should be doing enough right there.
When did you realize like this was it? Like you were gonna be a producer, you were gonna make music, you were gonna be somebody who really was creative in general? What was like the time in your career that you really felt that way?
And I felt that way since I was a kid, man.
Yeah?
Because I was standing in front of the mirror playing the tennis racket.
Nice. That's what it is. So let's talk about some of the new projects you got working on. You were just telling me some stuff out front. What keeps you inspired to make music, and where are you looking to go with your new sound or some of the new projects you have going on?
You know what? I'm just coming into a new sound. I feel like I'm using all the new techniques and like, you know, the way people are using vocal samples and new drums and, you know, how it sounds, but still applying the same techniques in terms of writing, which I might, you know, I've been doing since day one. But yeah, it's just like hot records are hot records.
Very true. So let's get into a little bit in terms of some of your experiences. What do you think is like the biggest piece of advice or the best experience you've had that you really you take with you almost every day when you're creating?
You know what? I think it's something that Jay-Z told me one time at the Hit Factory. He told me, he said, you know, people got to do what they do best and just always, you know, use that as their weapon. And for me, it's the piano, so I just always try to emphasize and make sure I'm doing something smart on the piano.
Right. We just Still Dre joint just played a couple minutes ago.
Oh, word.
You know what I'm saying? So it was a great segue into this. Do you ever look back and like say like, you know, wow, I really I can't believe I did that, or is there ever like an awe moment for you at this point?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I still, you know, there's records that I'm proud of. There's records that are, you know, just whatever to me. But that's still Dre is definitely one of them.
Anything you can share with us that you learned working with Dre or experiencing working with Dre?
Work ethic, and you know, searching and striving for the highest standards possible, and not just if you're not like really blowing somebody away when you play a track, like it's just average. You know, it has to be like well every time.
A lot of the guys in here obviously are just starting out right now. Can you give them any advice in terms of when is a record finished for you? Like when do you feel like, okay, I'm done right now?
It's hard to cut the umbilical cord, I think.
But every beat's a baby, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And it's difficult because I try and go into labor every day. You know what I mean? A new beat, and that would be a completely new experience. But to answer your question, you know what? I think sometimes it just comes a point where you hear it and you're like, you know, I call it sandbagging something. Like when you stuff there's no sand to it.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do that, you want to let it breathe. And I think it's important to not like try and make the track sound like it's finished before there's a vocal on it.
Okay.
Like I leave it and I'll do like 60-70% of the record, and then once the vocals are in there, you can do stuff in between the vocals that makes the magic, and it marries the vocal to the actual track.
Well, you know, in today's day and age, a lot of times you don't get a chance to be in the studio with the artist. I think you've had a lot of experience where you've been in the studio with the artist. How do you relate the synergy now versus being in the studio with an artist? Is there like, do you ever feel like I don't really want to send out beats? I'd rather be in the studio with somebody. Like, is there a difference between?
No, I don't do that. I don't do sending out beats. Like, first of all, any producer, that's a piece of advice is you probably ain't gonna get paid if you send it out. People will try and use it, or at least as long as possible.
Right.
You know, so you know you got to hold down to that and you know and walk it through. But you know, in terms of working with the artists and the vocalists, you know, it's important to do that and stay through that. If you're gonna call yourself a producer of a track, you know, you don't want to be just a track maker. You want to be a producer. You want to follow through and you know push the artist to get the best record possible because it's only gonna help you.
Right. Well, there's always that like debate, like you know, producer versus beat maker. What, in your definition, like what's the difference between the two?
A real producer sees the whole thing through and has input through the whole vision of the record, from you know what the melody's going to be on top, or you know at least collaborate with somebody on that, have an input on that. You know, sit there at the you know at the board and try and get good vocals out of somebody, or you know at least monitor the situation, critique it. Bringing in if you have a suggestion for a cameo, like y'all put some boss on this one, or that one, you know what I mean? That's really production stuff.
It's like facilitating the whole record. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What about reinvention? A lot of producers, I guess, they get to a certain point where their sound maybe got to a certain point. It's maybe not played out, but it's been used a lot. So at this point, like, how do you feel like you ever need to reinvent yourself, or do you ever?
I've done it several times.
Yeah,
I've done it several times. You know. It's crazy because I guess you could say I came up with maybe like 3 or 4 times I kind of like redefined certain genres of music by doing that, and it sucks when you hear like derivatives of that on the radio and people cheapen what you do. Right. Like when I started with the pianos on the West Coast, or then I started doing like the Egyptian Arabic stuff, and then everybody was like on that vibe. You know, it is what it is.
So what motivates you daily just to make music in general? What keeps you like, you know, how do you celebrate the small successes?
I love music. If I was, you know, I'd be happy playing piano in a bar with a tip jar. I'd rather be like a poor, you know, wedding piano player than be a rich player. You know what I mean?
So on the come up, you know, I think, you know, there's a producer grind out there. Like a lot of people always look at the artist. You know, the artist is always grinding, but people don't realize how the producer grinds. What was the producer grind like when you first started? Like how did you really get to this point?
I mean, I guess it was hitting the pavement, man, and like, you know, I have so many memories of, you know, running around New York and hustling like CDs and beats, like, you know, in these offices and, you know, cruising, like walking around the city, and, like, going to every label, and just soliciting myself, you know. If you don't solicit yourself and push people to listen, A&Rs, and you know, over time it grows to seeing the, you know, the presidents and the heads of A&Rs and that, but you gotta start somewhere and hit these offices because you might catch somebody's attention. squeaky wheel gets oil, you know?
Right. Well, obviously the game has changed. You know, obviously the technology we have and the internet and everything like that. How do you? I guess what kind of advice can you give to these guys to really get their music seen and heard out there? Because there's not as many A&Rs, there's not as many opportunities to get out there. What do you think these guys can do to really get seen and heard today in today's musical climate?
I mean, just be visible, put stuff out, put stuff on the internet, you know, and just keep grinding. You know, what I mean, if you do the work of 10 men, it's gonna raise your chances.
True. Well, a lot of advice sometimes we give to the producers is find that artist or find somebody to complement the sound. How important do you think it is for these guys to find a new artist out there and work with them?
I mean, it's completely important. I mean, if you know look back in history, everybody had that one artist that they, like Dre had Snoop. You know what I mean? There's just it's like producers associated with blowing up an artist.
Right.
If you attach yourself to something great and follow it through, you know, that's where you win the Heisman.
Sure. What do you feel is your greatest accomplishment to date?
Greatest accomplishment. I guess, you know, it's the volume. You know, I guess I sold like 350 million records in my career.
Wow.
Has there ever been a time where you really felt like somebody should have had the beat but really passed on it? Like, was there ever like a time where you were so passionate about like this is your beat, like you need to be on this?
Yeah, I mean, things end up going different places. Like I made, you know, hit records and I pushed them on a certain A-list artist and he wasn't feeling it, but another one was. And I told
like,
you so.
Maybe like Lean Back?
No, not Lean Back. But I tell you what, I did make the candy shop for Fat Joe. And he was like, nah, that don't sound like a hit.
Oh, man. I mean, you know, when you're creative like that, you're thinking about different avenues, producers. Like, do you make like beats specifically, or did you at the time make them specifically for that artist?
Oh yeah, a lot. I mean, I'll always sit in the studio and make stuff, but you know, I'll play a bunch of beats for people, and I'll usually like when an artist comes in, I'll say, yo, get started with this. Let's vibe out a little bit. You know, while you're cutting vocals, I'm gonna be in here coming up with another new one. So I'll just vibe with the artist and make stuff on the spot.
Do you usually give them like a skeleton to work with first, and then kind of go back into like some post production?
Yeah, I was talking about that earlier. Like I'll do it to a certain level, and then wait for them to to leave room for the melody.
Right.
You know, if you put too much in the track too early, it's like you don't leave room for a good thing because there's too many things going on.
A lot of busyness.
Yeah.
Let's talk about relationships a little bit. You know, one of the things we preach, obviously, to new producers to really build relationships with the artists directly or the managers directly, because obviously the A&R game and the industry has really changed. How important has relationships been in your career, you think?
Definitely important. You know, there's certain guys that over the years have been a great asset to me. You know, Jimmy Iovine, having a relationship with him. Craig Calvin. You know, so certain people, like if you hook them up and you deliver every time for them, you know, it's steady flow.
That.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's important. We always talk about, especially at B Camp, about you know, how important relationships are and how it is to nurture them. It's not about you. It's not about them. It's about kind of us in general. How we both benefit from it. Do you feel like the relationships you've had over the years have really been like your ability to work with different artists? And is it better for you to work with the artist directly, or have you had to go through management?
I mean, it's a little bit of everything. It's definitely good. I mean, to have an inside with the artist and penetrate, especially nowadays, because you know a lot of management teams and production houses and stuff, they have their own inside producers that they have equity in. So they're going to push their artists to work, you know, with those producers. And if you can penetrate, and then you know, it's a big enough artist, they can have their way.
Right.
You know, you'll get a record on. It's tricky. Yeah. Everybody's got their motives in the words.
So who haven't you worked with that you want to work with someday? Is there any other genre you want to go through, or any other artist specifically you want to work with?
You know what? I think it's really just keeping current, working with all the greatest, you know, today. You know, I always want to do records with you know, real artists that make timeless music. That's the most important, whether they're huge or they're just a new artist. It's something amazing I want to be part of.
What about new artists? You ever like find somebody and say, hey, I really want to work with this guy, and what does that take? Like, what do they have to have in order for that to even happen?
You know what? Sometimes it's not even about it. You got, I think the greatest challenge for me is reinventing an artist. Like, and that's why I'm doing. I I just signed to my new record label, CCS. I signed Mario.
So
years ago, he and I, we had the longest running #1 song. Let Me Love You. And
big record.
yeah, it was a huge record, but it was somebody else's artist, so
Right.
you know, now it's my artist, and the records that we're doing are crazy.
Is there a different approach for you, let's say, being an executive or an executive producer, aside from just making somebody some beats or giving them some records to work with?
Yeah, well, making a good album and EPing an album is like, you know, it's making sure there's some kind of thread or something that's like cohesive and makes the album have, you know, some kind of a motif, you know.
Okay. Do you feel like the producers finally getting their recognition in the game, like their identity is finally there? You have people being like creative directors at major labels and also at major companies. Like, do you feel like we're in that place right now for producers?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel like in the corporate world of music, there are a lot of retired creative people, and that's a good thing for music, I think, for sure.
That's great. Now get up for Scott Storch one time. You just give these guys like one really good gem that you've either learned or that you feel they need to know. Give them like one solid gem, man.
My gem gets greater later.
That's it?
That's it.
All right. You said it gets greater later.
It gets greater
Keep
later.
working.
Before Scott leaves, he's got to jump into a session really fast. We've got something special to give him. It's not a Grammy. It's not the Producer of the Year award.
Damn near a Grammy, baby.
But it comes from producers for producers, and this is somebody we feel who's been extremely influential in the world of music in general, not just hip hop and not just music, but just somebody who's been influential in the culture of music as well. So we call this the Influence Award. It's the Legend in the Making Award. Y'all give it up for one time for my man Scott. Let's do a couple of quick pictures, and then we're gonna get a little behind the scenes in the back room, and then Scott's gotta head to the studio. So right here, let's do this one right here. All right. Come over here. And your Instagram is Scott Storch Official?
Yes, sir.
So make sure you tag everything at Scott Storch Official so we see what's going on.
Yes.
Appreciate everybody coming out for beat camp. You don't gotta leave yet, but unfortunately Scott's gotta make it to a session. We're gonna kind of rush him into the back room real fast. One more time for Scott Storch, man. And also one more time for Eddie Houston that made all this happen.